Hello, friends, and welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. This is episode 26, and my name is Avery, your host. Today, we're talking about timelines, which, again, is one of the more woo-woo, kind of out there topics if it's not something that you are familiar with, because it just sounds so crazy sometimes to talk about. We are going to talk about linear time versus non-linear time, and to be clear, this is not something that I even fully grasp. It's very much like a physics, quantum physics, rocket science sort of topic. I don't even fully grasp how it all works. However, I know enough and have been learning enough to the point where I recognize how and where it impacts my life. And I think that's the piece we need to talk about is you have more control over your future and what you are manifesting and what timeline you are on than you probably realize day to day. And so understanding a little bit about this topic can really impact your life and what happens to you and whether or not you're taking the easy road or the hard road. Quick announcement before we get into the episode. I am launching a Patreon channel. So basically, I'm going to be doing a Patreon where I do one bonus episode every single week. So if you are a regular listener of the podcast and you really want to maybe go a little bit deeper, hear a little bit more of my personal side of things and how I'm dealing with the chaos and stuff in my real life, I'm going to share a lot more of that behind the scenes sort of thing in this Patreon. And so I will have a link to that. It will be $5 a month and you'll get an extra episode every week. Only the Patreons will have the ability to submit questions for Q&As. So I'm going to start integrating some Q&A episodes. And if you are a patron, you will get access to be able to be a part of that. You will also have early access to any episodes that I post on the regular podcast feed. So those will go out earlier for patrons. I also want to say I am opening this up. When I say I'm going to get a little bit more personal, I shared in last week's episode that I am going through a divorce. It's very fresh, very new. And while I have no intention of dragging my ex through the mud or speaking ill of him in any way, I am just going to be sharing my perspective spiritually and emotionally of how I'm handling it, how I got here, how I'm moving through things. And I'm going to share all of that in the very first Patreon episode. So if you are someone who has experienced that, is experiencing that, thinking about separating from a partner, that might be a good episode for you because I'm really going to get into the nitty-gritty of the emotions and the decisions and all of that mess that you deal with when you are going through something really difficult like that. Because again, I was married for almost 13 years. I have 3 children. You know, it was not an easy thing to walk through. And I think I can speak about it now from a more neutral perspective because it has been such a long time coming. But there's certainly a lot of emotion and learning and lesson learning and internal work that went into that and that has gotten me to where I am now. And so that's what I'm going to dive into on the first Patreon episode. So it's going to be juicy. So definitely sign up for that if you're interested in those more nitty-gritty personal episodes. I also just want to share a reminder that I do offer personal psychic readings. I've been so just grateful and enjoying doing those with you guys. And I'm so encouraged by how well they have been going so far. And some people have even come back for more than one session. So I am just grateful and I'm loving that. And so I do offer that. It's $44 right now for a personal psychic reading. You can find the link to that in the show notes. That is something that I'm doing as well. And overall, I'm just going to be adding a lot more just different offerings and ways to work with me here in the next month or so. So very excited about that. But let's get into timelines. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the idea of jumping timelines or changing timelines. Basically, how to choose different realities from the point that you are currently at. So let's talk about what even is a timeline. What does that even mean? Most of us, and I've mentioned this in previous episodes, we think of time, especially on Earth, as linear. Time is passing from the past to the future. It goes one way, and there's things that have already happened, there's things that are happening, and there's things that will happen. We're born, we grow up, we follow a path, we die. Time feels like a single line always moving forward. However, when you leave Earth, when you leave the physical and you move over to the spiritual, in the spiritual realm, from a quantum perspective, time doesn't work like that. Time doesn't even work the same way on Earth as it does just in space. If you go from here to the moon, it already works differently, which is a perfect example of, we have it in our minds that time works a certain way. But even physically, when you leave Earth, time works differently. So in the spiritual realm, it's even more detached from this way that we think of time. From a spiritual perspective, there is no linear time. Everything is happening all at once. Every moment of the past, every moment of the future, there is no linear time. It's all happening currently, presently, in a collective moment. And I don't know how to explain that with my human brain in any other way, because I know even saying that, that's a very confusing concept. Like, how could everything possibly be happening all at once? What happens when the thing happens and then it's over? I don't know. This is a confusing topic. But instead of getting into every little detail of quantum physics, I just want to talk about an idea that we can grasp, which is how to think of timelines. Like, we live in a field of infinite timelines. Think of them like energetic highways, right? We have all of these parallel realities running next to each other, which, again, if you are not here, this might be a really wild concept. And if you think I'm bogus, that's totally fine. You don't have to agree with me, but this is my personal belief and understanding. And I have witnessed moments even recently in my life where, these small actions do help me completely shift into something that wasn't possible prior to making that decision. I'm getting ahead of myself though. So you understand probably the idea of like parallel lives or parallel pathways, where if you make one choice, you're on this path. And if you make a different choice, you're on this other path. Because you have these two versions of yourself, of your life, that can live these two different realities. But you're only aware consciously of the one that you chose in your own timeline. Does that make sense? So again, think of them as like energetic highways, all running parallel to each other. Each timeline represents a different version of your life based on decisions you made, beliefs, your frequency, like your energetic frequency, your choices, and your energetic alignment. So that frequency, what path are you aligning to? A higher timeline where things are smoother, they come to you easier, things happen in a way that just sort of unfolds in front of you, or a more negative pathway timeline where things are clunkier and things are harder and life feels like trudging through the mud rather than just like rolling down a hill. For example, on one timeline, maybe you stay in your current job for the next 10 years. On another timeline, you quit that job and you start your own business, right? So now you have you on these two parallel different pathways, who one version of you made one choice and another version of you made another choice. And then from there, there's a million different branches where, you're branching off and have different parallel realities, different timelines that can branch off. Every single decision you make is a new pathway. So there's infinite numbers of these different pathways, these different options, and you can take any of them. And that's where it gets really confusing. But what I want you to take away from this is not necessarily understanding this crazy concept in every detail. It's more so just realizing that your choices that you make and your energetic frequency at any given moment has a direct impact on what will unfold for you next. The future is not fixed, it is fluid. And that is why when we talk about psychics or we talk about predictions, you've probably heard it said there is no such thing as a future prediction that is set in stone. It doesn't matter if you are the best psychic in the world. All a psychic or anybody who has premonitions or can see any kind of future event, there's never like this is definitely going to happen and this is set in stone, unless you're just like really close to it. At that point, maybe it's inevitable. But all a psychic can do is predict the current timeline that you're on. But you could easily, the very next day, make a totally different choice and change timelines. And it couldn't, you might be like, well, that psychic, nothing happened. Well, maybe maybe the psychic was wrong, or maybe you changed timelines. And so what they saw was no longer accurate because you made different choices that affected what unfolded in your life. All they can do, anybody that can read energy or future or whatever, myself included, all you can do is look at the current trajectory, read the current energy, the current timeline. But as things unfold and as things change, every decision, every frequency shift can shift what unfolds for every person. At any given moment, the energy that you embody right now locks in a different potential outcome. So when we jump timelines, we are shifting over to a different reality. So what does it mean to jump timelines? It means you're constantly shifting your reality, your energy, your identity, and your choices to align with a different version of reality. You don't have to wait for something to change. All you have to do is become the version of yourself that's already living in that life. Because again, let's be clear, every single opportunity, every single option that has ever been an option already exists. Anything that you could imagine, anything that you can think of in the quantum realm, that already exists. That reality already exists. You're not creating it necessarily like from scratch. All you're doing is aligning to the energetic version of yourself that's already living on that reality. So it's not that you are building a road, it's that you are shifting lanes. You're not laying down concrete to build a new road. You are just changing lanes into the lane that you prefer to be in. Or maybe the lane you don't prefer to be in if you're doing it unconsciously and you're making decisions that don't get you where you want to go. You can do it consciously or unconsciously. I would much prefer to do it consciously, which is why I'm doing this episode in the first place, because because if you know what is coming, if you know how to do this, you can consciously choose those more aligned realities. You can jump timelines on purpose, which is much easier than accidentally kind of stumbling through your life, not even realizing that you're putting yourself on these different paths. And this goes for little stuff, like what you're going to eat for breakfast. And this goes for big stuff, like who you marry. You know, it's every little decision. When I say infinite, I mean the timelines are infinite. Every little decision that you make puts you on an energetic path. So sometimes the jump feels subtle and you just feel lighter, or you stop resonating with old habits. You stopped biting your nails. You stopped drinking sodas, you know, and that was a choice that you made. And so now you're living this very similar life to this parallel one over here, but you feel a little healthier. You feel a little better. You feel a little bit more proud of yourself. Other times, the jump is more dramatic. You started a business. You broke up with your toxic ex. You wake up one day and you know it's time to end a relationship, to move across the country, to say yes to something that terrifies you, a bold choice that you're making. The bolder the decision that you make, the more it will impact the timeline, right? That makes sense. The heavier the decisions, the bigger the deal that it is, the more of an impact it will have on your life, the bigger the timeline jump. And every time you jump timelines, you are collapsing the space between who you were and who you are now, who you are becoming. Timelines, though, aren't about time. We should really call them frequency jumps, right? That would make it easier to understand because it's not about you making a decision around time. It's about you making a decision around your energy and your frequency. You don't have to change anything on the outside to jump timelines. All you have to do is make an internal decision. When I made the decision, even though I hadn't done anything yet, when I made the decision that I wanted to leave my marriage, and I had this is happening now, instantly, everything around me started changing. The opportunities that I had started changing. The people around me started changing. And again, I'll get into this more in the Patreon episode, but everything around me started changing, not because I actually did anything different yet, but because I made the decision absolutely for sure this is happening. And the universe took that frequency shift because I made the decision internally, energetically. And the universe said, whoa, okay, we clocked it. That decision has been made. It's 100% made. It's 100% dedicated. The decision is done. Now things can change. And they did. So it's like you don't even have to quit your job yet. If you just make the decision, no, I'm going to quit my job. That's all the universe needs. Now, obviously, you're going to follow through on that because you made the decision. And so the universe knows that action is coming if you made the decision, right? There's no fooling the universe. You can't do a fake out and be like, well, maybe I will. I'm gonna say that I am. Nope. If you set out the energy of like, this is a done deal, and that goes for anything, whether it's something you're gonna do, whether it's someone you're gonna be. You could just make the internal decision, I'm not going to be this type of person anymore. I will never again let someone treat me like that. I will never again put myself in this sort of position. I will never again, work at a job that is this toxic. I won't do it. I'm putting my foot down. I'm setting a personal boundary for the betterment of my life. That is a decision. That is an energetic decision that you have made, and the universe will respond to that, not because you did anything physically yet, but because you just made the shift internally. And that is all it takes to do a timeline jump. You are jumping by embodying a new frequency, by making new choices, holding new beliefs, speaking different words, feeling different feelings. And not just in that one moment, but from that moment forward, not just once, but over and over and over, embodying that decision that you've made, embodying I am not the kind of person who lets that slide anymore. I am going to quit this job, and here's how I'm going to do it, and here's what's coming, but I made the decision. Embodying whatever decision or frequency change has happened on the inside will just continue that snowball of unfolding your new reality and this new timeline that you're on. When you hear someone say, I quantum leaped my life, or I quantum leaped, what they really did was shift timelines. They became so clear and energetically committed to a new version of reality that the old one wasn't aligned anymore. It couldn't hold them anymore. It literally could not exist because they weren't an energetic match to it. If you internally say, I refuse to be the kind of person that lets somebody else treat me this way anymore, the universe will, again, clock that and be like, okay, you said it, you got it. But you have to fully believe it. You have to be fully bought in. You have to fully embody, I'm truly not that person anymore. I've made the decision. I will not do things that allow that old version of me to experience that again. I'm not doing it. Or if it's something you're trying to create, I am going to start this new business and it's going to be successful. You have to fully embody that, believe it. It's not even about, did you do the thing yet? It's about, do you embody the energy of that thing? I fully believe with confidence that this podcast is going to reach the right people. It's going to help the right people. It's going to impact people who need it, when they need it, where they need it. And I am confident that in doing that, the universe will use this in order to support me so that I can continue that service to others. This is how manifestation works, right? Manifestation and jumping timelines is it's not the same thing, but you're using manifestation to jump timelines. So if you understand manifestation, I need to do an episode on manifestation as well, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions there as well where we, don't quite understand why manifestations aren't working. But it's the same idea of once you fully embody and believe your next step, once you make a choice that you're fully in, the universe automatically, because it's just the way the rules work, it automatically has to match you up with the reality that fits the frequency. Because the rule is that the frequencies always have to match, right? That's the physics portion of it. The frequencies always have to match. So if you raise your frequency, by default, the universe got to match you with what you're a match to. That's just how it works. If you lower your frequency, you're a match to those lower frequency experience. You do not need to sit around and wait for life to hand you something. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't need to wait for something good to happen to you. All you need to do is ask, who do I want to be? What timeline is that version of me living on? What decisions do I need to make internally to be a match to that timeline? What do I need to believe about myself or about my life that will match me to that version of my life? What energy, what choices, what beliefs do I need to align with to get over there to that timeline? And from that place, that's where the jump starts. And as you make the decisions, embody the beliefs, embody that version of you, you're jumping. That's you in midair, jumping to land your feet on that new timeline. Think of timelines like railroad tracks running parallel to each other. At any moment, your consciousness can hop tracks, right? Not to a slightly different future, but sometimes to a drastically better future. Like you got one train going to, the Caribbean, and you got one train going to Detroit. But for a little while, I made myself laugh. For a little while, they're side by side, but they're going to end up going in completely different directions. So at some point, there's going to be a decision made that's going to put you on this destination or that destination. Which choice do you want to make? And you will know just based on how you feel. How do you feel? Do you feel powerless? Do you feel weak? Do you feel smothered? Do you feel disrespected? Versus do you feel empowered? Do you feel sure of yourself? Do you feel like you have self-worth? Do you feel confidence? Do you feel trust in the universe? Do you feel peace about where you're going? You can choose all of those things, not based on what's happening in your life, but just because you trust. You know how this works, you trust the universe, and you know that at any point you can jump timelines and be on a totally different train than where you think you're headed right now. You're going to Detroit. You don't want to go to Detroit. You're like, this sucks. I don't want to be on a train to Detroit. I see where this is going. I see the destination. I see it coming. I don't want this. This sucks. Guess what? At any given moment, you can, in your mind, now again, we go back to like soul contracts, and there's certain things you can avoid, certain lessons we need to make. However, even in those lessons, you can choose the high road or the low road. Even in the hard stuff you have to experience, you can choose the high road or the low road. So if you're on a train to Detroit and you see where you're going and you're like, I don't want to be here, all you have to do is make that internal decision that says, you know what? I don't want to be on this train to Detroit. I want to go to the Bahamas. I want to be on a tropical island somewhere. I want my train to go to Hawaii, right? I realize that's not possible, but just go with me here. You don't have to physically jump trains. What you have to do is make a decision in your mind to go, you know what? My train's not going to Detroit. My train is going to frickin' Bora Bora. I keep jumping tropical destinations, but you get the gist. My train is going to paradise. I'm going to be on a beach. I'm not going to Detroit, All you have to do in the quantum world is make that decision in your head. Be delusional. Yes. Is it delusional when you're on a train to Detroit to think you're going somewhere else? Yeah, it is. Do it. Be delusional, because your brain is wired from an earth perspective to think that certain things are logical and certain things are unlogical. And, this is just how it is. This is how earth works. This is how it's been your whole life. You have to distance yourself a little bit from that in order to embody the spiritual understanding of timelines and all of these things, because it doesn't work the way that you're so used to understanding it working. Okay. And that can be hard to undo all of that old programming and all of that old, knowledge that we've worked with our whole lives, but it is possible. Also, in this episode, I want to briefly mention collective timelines, because you have your individual timelines, like your life, and then we have collective timelines. And I think that this is a good time to mention this because now, in June of 2025, there is clearly some extremely volatile things going on in the world within politics. It's awful and it's messy and people are angry and sad and all of the things. So just like we have individual timelines, we're also part of collective timelines and a collective unfolding, right? We have shared energetic paths, like we're on a train also with all of these other people. And when we jump trains, now we're on a train with all of the same people, but shifted in a higher frequency. Now we are on a higher frequency, and so are they in that timeline. We've just risen to a frequency where the people around us are also on a higher frequency, right? So we have shared energetic paths shaped by the consciousness of entire communities, entire countries, or even the entire planet. When enough people shift their beliefs and frequencies or ways of being, a collective timeline can also jump. So I don't want to get too far into this because it is it's very confusing, and I don't want to pretend to know the ins and outs of how all of this works. But I want to mention it because I just want to point out that in a time like now, when there's so many awful things going on in the world, and the way that we are responding to those events, because they are horrible events and people are getting hurt and awful things are happening, when you respond to those events from a negative place of just anger and rage, and I understand because as humans, we feel the desire for things to be just and for things to be fair, and, good humans don't want to see other good humans hurting, and we don't have control over it, and it just feels really chaotic. I get all of that. But as a collective, when we respond to these events from a place of either fear or negativity, powerlessness, sadness, rage, all of those emotions, we're feeding into that timeline, not helping it. The best thing that you can do from a spiritual perspective when you see these awful things happening in the world is not to feed into the negative energy of that timeline. You are not helping those people or whatever is upsetting you, the situation that's upsetting you. You're not helping by feeding into the negative frequency of the situation. What is actually helpful from an energetic perspective, from a spiritual perspective, is actually to detach yourself from the emotions, right? From the response of it, not in a way where you don't care about people, but in a way where you actually can help. In your mind, what you can actually do to help is, and this is how prayer works, right? This is literally the energy of prayer. You picture in your mind a better outcome for those people. You put out into the universe an energetic vision, energetic feelings of the better outcome, of people being safe, of things going in a way that brings peace, of, world leaders bringing peace to the world and not, whatever it is. You have the ability to play into that collective timeline. But oftentimes we're so lost, and I understand because you're a good human and you don't like to see other good humans hurting, and I understand that. But just remember, that is not how you help people, especially when we are physically powerless in so many ways to help in ways that we want to. The best thing you can do is send positive energy to those people. Again, that is how prayer works. That is why prayer is a thing. You are putting out energy on someone else's or a group of people's behalf in a positive, energetic trajectory. And you can jump collective timelines with groups of people who also share your energetic frequency. So that's why when massive world events happen, like cultural, like spiritual awakenings on a mass level, or sudden shifts in societal values, that can feel like a reality split. Because you have some people, like 2020, a perfect example of this. 2020 happens, right? And people get so divided. This is the right way. No, this is the right way. I believe this. I believe that. This is wrong. No, this is wrong. It was like, and truly, I think that's what, the powers that be, the powers that were, I think that's what they want, genuinely, is to, when the collective people are so busy fighting each other, we are blind to what's really happening behind the scenes. We're blind to how much we're being controlled if we're so busy yelling at each other, that we can't actually see what's going on. That's my personal belief. And so again, in 2020, we're so busy fighting that we miss an opportunity to collectively jump timelines. So again, in 2020, you have some people that after that kind of unfolded, you have some people that went really into like fear and control and scarcity and just like this really deep, negative timeline from just a constant place of anxiety and fear, and probably a lot of like watching the news and probably a lot of like politics and seeing what people were saying and really just like getting dragged into that reality where it just completely enveloped their entire world. And then you had people that chose love over fear. You had people who jumped into more of a liberated, awakened state of being. People who chose alignment over conformity. People who said, you're entitled to your opinions. You're entitled to your opinions. I'm going to be over here. I don't want to get dragged down into the negative space. Like, yeah, I recognize that there's certain logistics we'll have to deal with here, just like living in this world while this is happening. But I'm not going to emotionally get thrown into the fire and burn up with everybody else, right? So you really had a collective that split into a million different realities, but two really big camps of people that like really got drug into the drama of it and people that didn't, and people that got drug into the drama of it for a while and then were able to get out of it, right? And walk. And I would say that's what I did, for a while. Yeah, I was. I've talked about this in my episode on the political parties, like the second episode I ever did. Go back and listen to that if you haven't. But I talked about how at first in 2020, I got drug into it. I was so angry and I was trying to push my beliefs on other people and I was just raging and blah. And I got so like just drug into the storylines until one day I was like, all this is doing is making me mad. All this is doing is making me it's putting me in a negative headspace. It's putting me in a negative energy, negative timeline. I'm not really out here convincing a bunch of other people to believe what I believe. I'm really just making myself mad. and probably triggering a bunch of other people. And let me tell you, I've come a long way. I mean, 2020 was definitely like the catalyst of my spiritual awakening, where I did so much inner work. I've come a long way since then, and I've really detached from politics, and I've really gone much more neutral in terms of like just not even wanting to engage with any parties at all. But my point in saying all of that is that's an example of collective timelines. So again, every decision that you make is not only impacting your individual timeline that you are on, but also the collective timeline that you are on as well. It's like a spider web, right? So it's a web of consciousness, or it's one of those train stations, have you ever seen like where, I don't even know how to explain this, like a rail station where there's a train who like drives into the circle and then the circle shifts to put it on a new trajectory and then it goes a different direction. And then another train comes into that same spot and the circle shifts and it takes a new track. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? What are those called? I'm clearly haven't ridden many trains in my life, but the point is, it's just a constant like web of all of these different choices, all of these different realities. And you can have a bunch of people over here, a bunch of people over here, and a few people. Like that's how I want you to picture it in your mind so that you can better understand that every little decision that you make matters. Every moment in time where you are choosing what frequency to align to, that matters. A rail yard, that was the word I was looking for. Those places where dozens of trains, like the tracks split and they merge and they veer off in different directions, a rail yard. Okay, anyway, another way to think of that might be sometimes your train runs parallel to the collective, and other times a collective shift reroutes your journey entirely, like a switch being pulled. Suddenly, everyone shifts together towards a different future, and your energy is part of it's like a school of fish. Again, guys, I'm like the analogy queen. Have I proved this yet? I'm like, this is how my brain works. It's like a school of fish. Every little individual fish is part of this group that's moving together. Okay, so you can leave. One fish can just like veer off and be like, peace out, I'm gone. But as a body, all of those fish, in order for a school of fish to swim together, they all have to be making the same decisions, right? So that the more fish there are, the bigger this school of fish is, right? The more powerful it is, hypothetically speaking. All right, let's get off of that. I feel like that was a little bit ranty, but I just think it's really important to understand. So how do you know when to jump timelines or like when it's time? It's pretty simple. When you feel like your life isn't aligned anymore, when you feel like you're on that train to Detroit, right? When you feel like you're looking at your life like, I'm not headed where I want to be headed, or the decisions that I've made to this point don't feel like they've gotten me where I wanted to go. I need to make different decisions. I need to align to a different frequency. I need to align to a different timeline. I'm not going where I'm going. So when you feel like it's time for a change, when you feel like you're not liking what is unfolding in your future, you know that you're meant for more. You can't seem to, get out of this loop that you're in. All it takes is internal decisions being made. And when you make that decision, again, spiritually, you're stepping into the version of yourself that already exists in the quantum. That version of you already exists. You don't have to create it. You don't have to create this whole new life, right? Because I think a lot of us get bogged down in the earth, the physicalness of it, the 3D of like, I want to start a business, but I got to like do it from scratch and I got to do like, yeah, you're going to have to put the work in. But instead of thinking of it like this whole life that you have to create, I want you to understand it from the perspective of that life already exists. That business that you want to create, it already exists. That relationship that you're dreaming of, it already exists. You have to be on the frequency to align to it. If you are dreaming of this just fantastic relationship, your soulmate where everything goes right, you are not aligned to that relationship if you haven't done your inner work. If you, in your current reality, are still somebody who reacts to all of the triggers or who maybe doesn't take accountability or whatever lessons that you're supposed to be learning and you're not learning, if you haven't learned that, if you haven't aligned to that higher version of yourself that would act differently, that would allow you to have a relationship with this soulmate, you can't get there. But you are energetically blocked from that because you haven't made choices that align you to that path. Does that make sense? If you want to jump timelines, you're jumping to your most empowered, expressed, connected self. Emotionally, you're choosing healing and expansion over patterns of survival. If you want, again, to jump timelines to meet the soulmate, whatever it is for you, when I talk about making those decisions, the decisions don't always come without work. Because let's say, again, you want to align and meet your soulmate. You cannot do that unless you align to the version of yourself who no longer, say, has an avoidant attachment style or has an anxious attachment style or who runs away from conflict. If you want to I want to align to that timeline, I'm going to be that person. Okay, to make that decision, you have to realize what needs to come with that. Does that make sense? I want to align to meet my soulmate. That's my decision. That's my internal decision. That's the timeline I want to jump. Okay. Well, I also, in order to be in that higher frequency, I have to recognize that I have some things that need to shift inside of me. I need to heal my inner child. I need to work through some of my old trauma. I need to, whatever it is for you. And we talk so much about emotional work and inner work on this podcast. I've done a hell ton of it. I'm still doing it, and I encourage you to do it. That's a big part of what we talk about here. That work is part of the making decisions to jump timelines. Does that make sense? Once you have done that work and made those inner decisions, that's when you get to timeline jump to a better environment, to healthier relationships, to more aligned income, to more flow in your day-to-day. It's not about escapism or fantasy. It's about authorship. Like, you are choosing and you're doing the work to get to where you want to go. And I don't mean physical work. It's not about creating a whole new life physically. It's about creating an aligned version of you energetically. You're not waiting for life to happen to you. You are choosing the version of you that is already on the path you want to be on. And how do you know if you have actually jumped timelines? You will know. You will know. Again, I'm going to talk about this more in the Patreon a little bit of what happened when I jumped timelines and how that unfolded for me. But energetically, you're going to notice a frequency shift. Your body's going to feel lighter. Your spiritual gifts may unlock more. Your old patterns might fall away. So again, even making the decision, I'm going to be responsible for my own emotions from now on, and I'm not going to let other people treat me that way. Okay, that's a decision. Just making that decision in your mind starts helping you to get rid of those old patterns because you're determined, because you made the decision in your mind. Spiritually, you will have a new awareness. You'll have more synchronicities come into your life. You'll have more signs and things from the universe. You'll have more clarity around your purpose. Practically, you will start to see things open up. You'll be like, whoa, all of a sudden my content's getting all this eyeballs on it. All of a sudden, I got offered a new job. All of a sudden, I got a raise. All of a sudden, a relationship came into my life. All of a sudden, these opportunities are just unfolding in front of me. Now, it doesn't mean your whole life's going to flip overnight, but you will see shifts. Especially, again, the bolder the decision, the bigger thing that you are changing in your life, the more obvious these new practical opportunities and doors opening will be. When you make when you make the decision internally to leave a toxic job, for example, if you really truly made that decision and you are embodying, I am not the kind of person who works in a toxic environment anymore. I don't let my coworkers or my boss speak to me this way anymore. I'm not doing this anymore, period. Universe, this decision is made. Okay, as long as you are fully embodied in that, the universe will listen. Now you're aligned to a new path. Now, all of a sudden, my friend has a friend and this job just opened up. It's your dream job. This other opportunity just opened up. Oh, all of a sudden, somebody asks you, have you ever thought about starting this business? Like, you would be really good at that. I really think people would pay to see you do that. Whatever it is, all of a sudden the door starts opening. And you might not always consciously even notice that it's happening, but that is the timeline shift opening up to you. Again, just like manifestation, in order to see that start opening up, you have to start acting like, start thinking like, start speaking like that future self. Start becoming the person who just made that decision internally. You're collapsing the gap now between who you were and who you're becoming. You're closing the gap between, oh, I've always wanted to leave my job. I've always wanted to break up with my toxic ex, but I just, whatever, into I am doing this. I am being this new decision, this new person. And then how long does it take for that new reality to unfold? Well, it depends. It depends on your readiness. It depends on how deeply rooted you are in that new decision, in that new identity. The universe will respond to your energy. It is always going to mirror exactly what you give it. So if you've made the decision but you're timid, your whole life's not going to change. It's going to mirror back to you a timid energy, maybe a little bit of changes, maybe a little bit of frequency shifts, not the whole thing if you didn't make the full decision with boldness. You know what I mean? How long it takes depends on how strong the energy is. Some shifts are instant, like a quantum leap, right? That's more of an instant thing. And others unfold gradually over weeks, over months. It just depends. It's less about time. It's more about stabilizing the frequency. I don't know why, but I feel like I did get really fired up in this episode. I feel a little bit like I'm yelling at you guys. I'm sorry. I'm just so passionate about it because, again, I always like to talk about things that I'm personally going through or experiencing or working through because I feel like it makes the podcast more, A, relatable, and B, I'm speaking on something that is so relevant to me. I feel like my energy can better translate to you, not just my words, but literally my energy to like what is actually the meaning that I'm trying to get across. But sometimes my passion gets a little heated and I feel like I'm yelling at you and I'm sorry. So just a reminder that I am launching a Patreon channel for $5 a month. You get a bonus episode per week and you get a little bit deeper into my personal mess. Not always. Sometimes it'll just be more deep diving into a topic. We'll talk more probably on the Patreon about relationships and things like that. More of the like personal type stuff. So if that's something that interests you, there will be a link. So definitely check that out. And again, only the patrons will have the ability to ask questions that I will do Q&A episodes on for the podcast. So that's another little perk. Please don't forget to leave the podcast a review. It makes a really big difference and I appreciate it so much. Oh, also, I have uploaded my RSS feed to YouTube. So now Dare Me to Prosper has a YouTube channel where you can view the videos and I will post a couple of the interviews that I did there, one with Emily the Mystic and the episode on deconstructing Christianity that I did with my sister. I do have videos of those two interviews, so I will post those there as well. If you are somebody that prefers to listen to podcasts on YouTube or you want to see the video for some of the interviews, that will be there as well. So check that out. And until next time, this was Dare Me to Prosper. Bye, guys.